Hello, I'm Michael. There's a saying in the New Testament of which I'm very fond. It comes from the letter of James. Faith without action is useless. Very strong statement, that. Faith without action is useless. I think we can discover what people really believe, what their faith is, by what they do rather than what they say. And certainly we Quakers think that. We don't have a formal creed, a statement of beliefs. And we say that people can discover what we believe by what we do. For me, faith isn't about believing a set of propositions, a set of ideas. It's about trying to be open to God, open to the leadings of God, to be responsive to what God wants us to do. That sounds as though I believe that God is a sort of person. I don't think that about God. I see God very much as a creative power in the universe, a creative power working for good in all things. And I think what we need to do as individual people is to try to align ourselves with that activity of God, with that creative power. And that when we do that, we find that things come along for us to do, opportunities present themselves, doors begin to open, and we can go through those doors in faith, trusting that it's the right thing to do. So what happens if we get a sense that we ought to do something, a leading from God, a nudge from God? How do we discern whether that's right? The problem is there are so many things that we could do, so many good things that we could give our time to. How do we know whether we should respond to these particular things that come along? I think what we have to do is to try and work out what's right for us as individual people, what's right for me. Doing something where I can use my abilities, my talents to best effect, something that I ought to do. I'm reminded by one of our sayings in Advices and Queries, this little book that we use so often, is that what we're required to do is to do what love requires of us, which may not be the same as great busyness. And if we're not careful as Quakers, we can get tied up in so many things that we're not particularly effective. So it's a matter of discernment, deciding, selecting what we ought to do. So how do we do that? Well, there are times, certainly this is my experience, there are times when something comes along, we get a feeling that we ought to do something, we investigate it, and it's absolutely clear that that's something that's right for us, something we ought to do. There's no question about it at all. And it's equally true that sometimes an idea is presented to us, a suggestion is made to us, sometimes from Quaker nominations committees who are seeking people to do jobs. And it's been clear to me then that that wasn't the time to do that. It wasn't right for me to do that. More common, though, than certainty is a lack of clearness about what I should do. If it's suggested to me or I get an idea about doing something, I'm not entirely clear whether it's the right thing for me to do. Is this really something from God? Is it really a nudge or a prompt from God to do this? Is my hesitation a lack of faith in God or a warning that it's something I shouldn't do? Am I being encouraged to do this particular thing by unworthy motives about which I'm ignorant? There's that element of uncertainty about it. If I find myself in this position of uncertainty as to whether I should do something or not, whether it really is an act of faith to do it, I find various things are helpful to me. One test that I use is to see whether what I feel I'm being led to do squares with our Quaker testimonies, our testimonies to truth and equality, to simplicity, to peace. If what I'm being encouraged to do responds to one or more of those testimonies, then that might well be a sign that it's right. Another thing that's very helpful in trying to make up my mind as to whether to do something is support and encouragement from the Quaker community. Talking to other Quakers about what I feel I perhaps ought to do can be very helpful, as can reading Quaker literature, particularly our book Quaker Faith and Practice. That can help me sort my ideas out and to decide whether something that I ought to do is the right thing for me to do. But if at the end of this process of discernment the end of this, trying to sort out my ideas, if I accept that what I'm being to do really is a leading from God, and I respond in faith, my experience is that what I do will be blessed and will lead for me to personal fulfillment.